Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar by the Osiris project funded by Interreg Europe. My name is Ricardo Gonçalves, and I work at the Municipality of Fundão, and I'll be your moderator today. This webinar is brought to you by the Municipality of Fundão in Portugal, in cooperation with the University of Beira Interior and Capgemini Engineering. Today, we will share with you some insights about the role of cybersecurity in the remote work era. I would like to remind you that you can post questions and comments in the chat on the YouTube, but please remind that you need to be logged in on YouTube to do so. Osiris stands for Open Social Innovation Policies driven by co-creative regional innovation ecosystems. So it is all about finding new ways of engaging citizens and policymakers in activities that make their lives better in different ways. This is the third of a series of webinars that the Osiris partners are launching to seek answers to questions like, what did we learn from working with co-creation, open and social innovation for regional development during the pandemic? What learning experience do we take with us for the future? And what smart solutions or insights from this period will actually change our way of work? Before we start, I would like to share with you some information about the Municipality of Fundão, and I think that we can do it with a brief video.
Um amigo meu disse-me para vir conhecer o Fundão. Quem sabe até vir viver para o Fundão. Aliás, que o Fundão é excelente para investir. Investir no Fundão. Imaginem. Há pessoas que acreditam em tudo. Dizem que no Fundão existem muitas empresas de base tecnológica. Cultura. O meu amigo também me disse que no Fundão existem paisagens fantásticas.
Chefe, não faz nada.
Vai, mas é trabalhar mesmo. Um amigo meu disse-me para vir conhecer o Fundão. Quem sabe até vir viver para o Fundão. Imaginem. Já lá vão 3 anos. A nossa.
Now, to start our webinar, let me pass the word to Pedro Inácio, Pro-Rector of the University of Beira Interior and Associate Professor of the Department of Computer Science, and also researcher at Instituto de Telecomunicações, Telecom Institute in Portugal. He will share with you some reflections about how remote work is changing the cybersecurity landscape. Pedro, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ricardo. Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Yeah,
perfectly.
okay, nice. Thank you also for the introduction, and congratulations on the video. I haven't had the opportunity to see it yet, but it's funny at the same time, informative, and it represents very well Fundão. As Ricardo already had the opportunity to start this topic, I'll be talking about cybersecurity in the remote work era. And this is a talk delivered in the context of this OSIRIS project. I hope that this is an informative talk, and I hope that we all have fun while doing it. First off, thanks for having me. This is it seems to me that's an excellent initiative, an excellent project. I'm truly honored, and please also forgive me. People tell me to ask for sorry before I start my presentation. Sometimes I use sarcasm to deliver some of the contents I share with you. So if you notice some sarcasm along the way, it's part of it, okay? And I'm sorry about it also. So I also want to mention that I'm from the University of Interior, which is an university very near to Fundão. I'm also the coordinator of a group called CSERT.UBI. This group is about cybersecurity. It's the team of cybersecurity at UBI. I'm also normally entitled by the association, the Portuguese Association for Computer Security, to deliver some of these presentations, and this goes into their activities. So I mentioned them here. I'm also a researcher of the Institute of Telecomunicações. This is actually the background that my background on all these subjects. You can see that we have along the way we have several facets of the same person. I strongly believe that in spite of the institutional me that you see on the top left corner of this slide, and which is the person that probably is better presented by the words that you see on the right side. So my name is Pedro Inácio. I live in Covilhã, which is also near Fundão. I lecture subjects related with this topic specifically here at the University of Interior, namely information assurance and security. I also used to lecture the subject of programming of mobile devices, but currently I'm a prorector for the Digital University here. I'm also the data protection officer of UBI. I'm an instructor of the Cisco Academy, and my background is all in computer science or mathematics. So I have a PhD in computer science and engineering, and I've been in a company which was Nokia Siemens Networks, previously Siemens, through my PhD period. I'm also an IEEE senior member, and I have some research, I would say, worldwide recognized in the cybersecurity area. I would say that in spite of all that, the real me is the one that you see on the left side on the bottom, and maybe on the top side also in this slide, because this is what I am most of the day. In spite of what I'm going to tell you here, which I'm going to talk about security, and that we need to be, sometimes I say that we need to be careful about what we do online, or that some stuff are dangerous, for example. You will see that contrary to all of that, my digital footprint is overly big for the things that I usually say here, okay? So it's like a little bit contradictory, okay? So if you go online, you will see that I'm also a very tech-savvy person, and as such, I have lots of accounts in all kinds of social networks, and you'll see a lot of information about myself everywhere. This is a little bit contradictory to what I actually do. I would say that this presentation is fully interactive, but since we are in the remote work era and we are also delivering this as a webinar, I don't know if you will be able to interact with me, but please do so if you feel like it. I will try to otherwise or later on answer all the questions or all the comments that you may have about what I'm going to say. So I would say quick facts about cybersecurity in this remote work era. And these are, let's say, good news for people who love bad news. There are two kinds. It's well known that there are two kinds of organizations nowadays: those that have been hacked and those that don't know that they have been hacked. So this is a former CEO of Cisco Systems. It's a statement from him, and it's strongly believed that this is probably true to a large number of companies worldwide. So even the companies that say that they have not been attacked or hacked successfully, probably they were, but they just don't know it. And another interesting fact or interesting result that came out of a research study is that an organization takes an average of 191 days to discover that a data breach has happened. So these two facts combined just say that, okay, probably we have been attacked, or if we have not been attacked, we might discover this, but on average will take a long time to discover that this happened. So what were the main points, or what did change during the pandemics and the shift to remote work? And you will see that I'm mostly a very positive person about this, because let's face it, otherwise I would not be able to live with myself, and knowing that we are always under attack or always handling this kind of malicious behavior. So during the pandemics, and when we all have to move home, for example, to do some work, what changed basically were these three things, these three vectors, let's call them like that. Number one, more people were using technology from different places. Number two, more devices were connected to the internet. And number three, all of us relaxed some assumptions in favor of having the work done. And this is probably a matter of opinion, but I would leave it as it is. And it is my opinion in this case, but I would leave it as it is so that we can at least think about it. So in the next slide, what I'm showing you is the formula that you can use, or that we normally use to calculate the risk of having an attack. Okay, so this is a very basic way of calculating the risk, and the risk is calculated by the product. It's just a multiplication of two factors. It's the probability of an attack happening, which is P, and then we have V, which is the value of the system that we aim to protect. So the more valuable the system is, the higher the risk. The more probable the attack is, the higher the risk also. So let's look at this formula here from the 3 points that I just raised before, okay? So let's see what happened to this formula by looking at those things. So number one, we have more people. So, and this includes people without any practicing working with a computer. Some people, for example, some people were using paper at work. Some people would not need technology at all in their day-to-day lives, but then suddenly they started needing the usage of technology to do their work. So there were people that were not even using the computers, but now they are using them. So this is more people. This contributes to a higher, or to a more heterogeneous, let's say more diversified environment, digital environment. It's richer, but it's more heterogeneous, so it's more different. It has more people, more different people, and more devices. So the second thing is more devices. So this includes, these more devices includes completely outdated devices that some workers were not using for months. For example, old computers that they had at home that they were not using, for example, for 6 months or 7 months. People needed to use those computers, because they needed to suddenly to connect to their work. So these computers were outdated and full of vulnerabilities. So we moved from a paradigm which is bring your own device to the work to use your own device everywhere. Okay, so this was a change. So this contributes again, if you notice, to a richer yet more heterogeneous digital environment. So let's move on and see the relaxed assumptions thing. So this includes rushing the elaboration of passwords. Okay, so we for example, we do not do the same complex passwords as before. We just make a quicker password when we are in a rush to get to a meeting. For example, imagine that you need to get to a meeting with your boss. Just connect the computer, but something is not working. It's asking for a new password, and when you're going to do the new password, you just press the password at ease or very quickly, and the password is very weak. So this also includes connecting with microphone and camera on from anywhere in the house, and let's face it, including sometimes the bathroom or out of the house, okay? So this contributes then again to the more that I was mentioning before. So if you notice to these two previous slides, I have a sentence at the bottom that says this contributes to a richer yet more, and then the next one says this contributes to a richer yet more heterogeneous, and this only has, this contributes to a more. It's more, more, and more. So let's keep on this relaxed assumptions topic. Digitalized, for example, not to be mistaken with digital in this case, digitalized signatures became, for example, a commonplace. And let's face it, this is one of the most idiotic or silly mistakes that we can make nowadays, is to digitalize our signatures, because our signatures should be unique and should be personal. If you write your signature and you digitalize it and you send it to someone, you're saying to that person, here, you have my digital signature. It's already a copy. You can crop and paste it everywhere, but I'm just not saying this. This contributes again to more. Let's face it, we relaxed so much the assumptions that, for example, if I take a photo and paste it online, in this case, this photo is even before pandemics, we already had some relaxed assumptions on that case. If you notice, I paste, for example, I put this photo in Facebook, thinking that the photo just has some people there saying that we are at an event, but if you notice closely, the relaxed assumptions in my head did not see that the place where I was at that moment is exactly on the photo. These kind of things is not, they are invisible to the eyes of the person that is doing this, that is sharing, you know. So these are the kind of relaxed assumptions that we took. So all of this, okay, all of the previous mores greatly contribute to an increase of the probability factor of the risk formula. So we have more probability of having a problem, an attack, okay? So the P factor is bigger. Moreover, the information systems became more valuable because they contain more data, and they are also necessary for companies to develop their work. So all these formulas, you can see, became larger. The risk is bigger on the remote work era in terms of cybersecurity risk. So, but as I told you before, most of the time, I'm a very positive person. So on a side note, I want to say that it's amazing. I think it's amazing that we could shift from a moment to the other. We could shift a lot of people home and still get the work done. It's actually amazing if we look at the time frame in which we reacted to this and how the computers and the technology was ready to address this problem. It's amazing that so many people stayed at home and work still was being done. For example, classes on universities, they just kept going. They didn't stop. Classes on high school, they also kept going. It was not exactly the same thing, but it was a very tight time frame, and we were able to adapt very quickly. This is good, okay? But it doesn't change the fact that we needed to change all of this and largely increase the heterogeneity of this digital realm in an abrupt manner. So what are the main threats of nowadays in the remote work area? What are the main cybersecurity threats that we are facing right now from the user perspective? Well, we can maybe separate them in four parts, though the last one has much to do with the with the other ones. For the first one is malware in general. We have lots of problems with malware. We are going to see what malware is. Then ransomware in particular, because ransomware is a form of malware. Then we have weak credentials, and then we have intense phishing and social engineering campaigns. The way I'm going to do this is to just paste some sentences here and tag them as myths or truths to see, to spawn some curiosity in your mind about all of this, okay? So, since we have more people handling technology and we have more connected devices and more data being added to the digital realm, malware, and more specifically ransomware, has been thriving in this remote work era. So what is malware? Malware is just this, is software whose functionality is malicious. So malware is exactly the same thing, I would say. It's the same thing as Zoom that we are using. Zoom is a software, or the YouTube or the systems that we use all days is software, but the intentions or the functionality of this software is good. And in the other case, when we are talking about malware, we just have software whose functionality is something malicious. It wants to do something that it's against the things that we believe that it's good. Okay, that's the definition. And we have several things that fall within the panoply of malicious software. For example, we have virus, trojans, worms, spyware, adware, and ransomware, of course. So what is ransomware? Ransomware is malware whose functionality is to make data unavailable. Okay, and if we go into specifics, we will see that incredibly ransomware is being very effective in fulfilling the purpose or the functionality it's been designed for, very much due to the psychological factors that is surrounding ransomware. And when I'm talking about psychological factors, I'm talking about the fact that when we have something in our computer that is highly valuable to us, it might not be valuable to others, but it's valuable to us. For example, I would say a PhD thesis that you are writing, or a paper that you are writing, or I don't know, some document that you have in your computer, or some photos of your last vacations of the daughters or sons or family that you just have on your computer. The photos and the data are there, and someone encrypts the data but leaves the data in your computer. And this is the fact. I would say that this is an important factor that we have to deal with in this case, is the fact that the data still remains in your computer. And most of the times when you're infected with ransomware, you see the files there. They are there. It's like the thesis is still there. The thesis is here. I can press the thesis, I just cannot open it without paying something. And this has a huge impact, a psychological impact on people. And that's why it's so effective most of the times in obtaining the ransom. And that's why it affects us so much. But let's just put the myths and facts all over this talk and start talking about it on those terms. So there is a strong suspicion that malware is developed by humans. And I would transform this, or I would say that this is a fact. So this is one of those things that I was mentioning before. I'm just going to lay down some of these things as myths or facts, and use sarcasm just to convey the meaning of all this. What I'm trying to say here is that since malware is developed by humans, it will also have flaws. Most malware also has flaws, but the difference here is that when someone is developing malware, that is a stronger motivation than for most of the good software. So another myth or fact, I don't know, is that viruses spread autonomously without any human intervention. And I don't know if you know this, but this is a myth. This is not true. There is no virus that can spread without human intervention. What I'm trying to say is that a virus, this kind of computer program, needs a human to install the virus. So if you receive an email with a virus, you need to press the file, and allow the virus to install, okay? So I'm not saying that there isn't malware that can be installed without human intervention. They're just not viruses in those cases. So let's move on. And I have, if you notice the difference here is, here I have viruses, and then I have worms. And it says worms spreads autonomously without any human intervention. And while before I was tagging that as a myth, this one is a fact. Worms can spread completely automatically without any human intervention. But in this case, in order for that to happen, the system needs to have vulnerabilities that the virus or the worms, sorry, that the worms exploit. Okay, so these worms are more difficult to develop. So just let's have a break for analysis and brief conclusions of this. Some malware, okay, not all of it, spreads completely autonomously, but that type of malware, the one that spreads completely autonomously, is harder to develop, and its effectiveness depends on the amount of vulnerabilities of your system. So, and this thing, the last one, is in complete control of the human that controls the system. So let's look at the entire loop here. Humans develop malware, and humans can also do something about the malware spreading. Because if you use a system that has vulnerabilities, it is more prone to malware spreading. If you, for example, allow a virus to spread, it's because you pressed an attachment on an email. So I'm just trying to emphasize that we have something to do with this. Some ransomware has better service support than some products or telecommunication operators. And this, unfortunately, is a fact. So I don't know if you noticed, but lately, if you are attacked by a ransomware, I hope not, but if you are, you will see that most of the times the ransomware operator will offer you some help in case you don't know how to remove the ransomware. They will be very nice with you, and they will say, if you want some help, I can help you remove if you pay the ransom. So, and this service in many cases is even better than the ones that you have for real services. Once a system, another myth or fact, once a system has been infected, all problems related with ransomware can be solved without paying the ransom. And this is, I'm taking some risk here by talking about this, because most people will say, don't pay the ransom if we are attacked by ransomware. But I'm also going to show you that most companies just pay the ransom to obtain the data back. So most of the times, I would say most of the times, to recover the data, if you don't have a backup of the data, you need to pay the ransom to obtain the data back after you have been infected with malware. This is perhaps, you know, contradictory to what we are aimed to believe. We should not pay like this kind of thing. We should not pay for this, but sometimes we have no other choice. So once the system has been infected, not all of the problems can be solved without paying the ransom. Sometimes we have to pay it. So if we look at this report from 2021 stating the state of ransomware, it indicates that 83% of the victims pay to have the data restored. Why? Why does this happen? Because number one, we don't have backups. Normally, we don't have backups. I would say common people do not have backups of data. And sometimes they have backups, but the backup is also affected by the ransomware. And then what this means is that if we are infected, they need to solve it. And then another report showed that 93 of the companies were then allocating special budget just to deal with increased threats, some of them related with ransomware. So let's stop and make a break for analysis and brief conclusions here. Ransomware explores interesting attack vectors that are at their maximum nowadays. And these attack vectors are these three. Number one, people. And people are the number one factor that contributes to malware spreading, to the psychological part, and to pay ransoms. They explore fragile and outdated and unsupervised systems, because if we are in a company most systems are supervised, but if we go home, we use sometimes our own device that is fragile, it's outdated, and it's unsupervised because it's out of the bounds or the perimeter of the company. And then they explore data, which we have way more data than before. So these are the three things that ransomware, or why ransomware is thriving so much. What about weak credentials? When I have here one of those things, when asked to construct passwords with capital letters, numbers, and special characters, humans typically devise, and let me know if this is contrary to what you believe, passwords starting with a capital, this normally do passwords starting with a capital letter, and then numbers and special characters appear at the start or at the end of the password, but not in the middle. So this means that when we devise passwords, even if they ask us, if someone asks us to devise a very complex password, the rules in our heads, most of the times we have rules that say a password or special characters should be at the end or at the beginning, because let's face it, when we were at the school, the teacher would always say that if you include a number in the middle of the password, this would be like a capital or a critical sin if you did this. So in our minds, we still have rules that avoid us to include numbers or special characters in the middle of words. So if someone asks us to do a password, we'll do a word or some words, and then we'll put the special characters in the beginning, in the end, or in the middle of words, but not in the middle of the words per se. We'll put it in between words if there is more than one word. So this is one of those things of myth and fact. Passwords should be reused in several systems and internet services to maximize their utility. We all do this. We use the same password everywhere, or we use the same password in more than one system, but this is obviously a myth. We should not reuse passwords. We should make an effort to have different passwords. They should actually be completely random passwords to different services, because reusing the same passwords is the same of maximizing the breach of several accounts at the same time. If one password gets compromised, all the systems that we use, in which we use that password, might be compromised. Then we have this sentence saying that phishing was the #1 cause for successful ransomware attacks in 2021, and this was a fact also. And this one, I'm not even going to put it as a myth or a fact. The human is the direct or indirect root cause of attacks or fragilities of computer systems nowadays. So I'm just putting the human factor exactly at the middle of all this, because I believe that we can still do a lot of things to this. I'm going to ask Ricardo if I'm still in line with time, if it's okay. Otherwise, yeah.
I think we have more 5 minutes more.
Okay,
thank you.
I can finish in 5 minutes. So what are the just to take some myths out of what we are using nowadays in terms of tools that I think everyone deals with in the remote work era, which are, for example, virtual private networks and antivirus and firewalls. Just to clear out some of this, let's say, keywords here. For example, I'm including here what we all think, or at least what sometimes we think a virtual private network is, which is a magical way to access the company or institution services that were otherwise unavailable by some strange reasons. For example, if someone tells you that you need the VPN to access the email, but you cannot access the email without the VPN, we found it strange. Why cannot access the email without the VPN? But then if we connect with the VPN, we have access to the service. So we just say, or our head just puts out this magical explanation that, okay, VPN will allow this. It's the way of doing it. But obviously, the VPN is just a means, a technological means of setting up a tunnel between our computer at the place we are at that moment and the company. And this tunnel is typically encrypted, which is the same, if we want a metaphor for this, it's the same of thinking on the road from your house to your company and placing a tunnel there, which everyone can see that there's a tunnel, but no one can see what's inside of the tunnel. So this is a virtual private network. That's how it works. So the encryption of the data works like a tunnel for you. Then we have the antivirus, and an antivirus. I was doing this yesterday. I was laughing to myself when I did this, because I wrote this. This was the first time I wrote it. Sometimes I make an effort, but this one came out naturally. An antivirus is a small device which is living inside of my computer, equipped with a laser gun that kills nearly invisible threats, such as viruses. Obviously, this one doesn't. I didn't even tag it as a myth or as a truth. I will just let it be for you to think about it. I'm just going to say afterwards that an antivirus is actually a software. So like the viruses are softwares, antivirus is also softwares that do exactly or that contradict what viruses do. An antivirus just tries to find a malicious code inserted in your computer. That's how it works. And then firewalls, which in many movies we see that they are depicted as a wall made of fire, or if we go into the movies like technology, see that it's some kind of barrier that an attacker or an hacker has to pass. But obviously a firewall is not that. A firewall is just a software component or an hardware component or a set of systems that allows or rejects traffic based on a given set of rules. So I put those two rules here just for you to get a grasp of what a firewall is. And the firewall is something that, for example, allows all traffic, all internet traffic to pass or reject all connections coming from outside. And this is what a firewall does. It just looks at connections and then it let it pass or not. So how will cybersecurity work in the future in this, looking at all this that we are facing now and to the past, and also to how mankind should thrive, let's say. I strongly believe that, but this is something more personal. I strongly believe that the day where the digital realm will be secure by design will come. Okay, so what I'm trying to say here is that one day we'll not have to worry about cybersecurity. We're just not there yet. And why do I say this? Why do I say that one day we'll not need to worry about this? Because if we look into the past, we see that humans are always trying to get better, to improve systems, to get better systems, and to, for example, flight travels. We come a long way in flight traveling, and we think that flight traveling is secure. We can also do this, obviously, in the digital realm, and the day in which the systems will secure by design will probably come, or I hope, at least I hope so. But we are not there yet, and things may still get worse before they get better. So what can we do in the meanwhile? From the point of view of the user, I would say that one of the best ways of dealing with this is to get informed, know stuff, be curious. For example, be cautious also. So suspect, in this case, I'm going to be very specific, but this be cautious is not only applied to this one I'm going to say, but for example, suspect before opening attachments. This be cautious can also be broader, obviously, but this is nowadays it's an important attack vector. Also, update our system when possible. So many people say, okay, Windows is always updating, it updates at the worst times. But updating will avoid vulnerabilities and will avoid automatically spreading of malware, and seek help if necessary. Sometimes people get attacked or sometimes people get a problem and then out of I don't know, for all kinds of reasons, they don't seek help. And this, if necessary, you should do it. And actually, I also put the last one, though it's not related with so related with cybersecurity, which is think before publishing. And this will conclude my presentation. Thank you for your attention. And I don't know if we'll have questions now or afterwards, but I'm grateful and receptive for any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Pedro, for your very interesting presentation. It's not the first time for me, but I always have a good time hearing and learning from you. I think that we have some interactions in the chat and some questions, but we will come back to that at the end of the presentations. Now I'll pass the word to Eunice Martins, Embedded Systems Engineer at Capgemini Engineering. Former Altran, Capgemini Engineering is a world leader in the engineering and R&D services. With deep industries expertise, Capgemini is trusted by its clients to address the entire breadth of their business needs, from strategy and design to operations, fueled by the fast-evolving and innovative world of cloud, data, AI, connectivity, software, digital engineering, and platforms. Today, Eunice will give us a presentation on walking hand in hand with cybersecurity in a new and remote world. Please, Eunice.
All right, thank you so much. So good afternoon all. Before starting, allow me to thank you very much for the invitation to be here today. It is also a pleasure to share the same virtual room with the previous presenter that happened to be my teacher of informatics security when I was at university. And as it was announced, I'm an embedded systems engineer working at Capgemini Engineering. For the ones not very acquainted with the name or with the company, Capgemini Engineering is a powerhouse of engineering services and R&D. We were previously known as Altran, but Altran has been acquired by the group Capgemini due to our potential in providing engineering services. And nowadays, we are happy to say that we work for clients in numerous areas, so life sciences, automotive, railways, aeronautics, and so on. So for the ones attending that would like to get to know more about our work and what we do on a daily basis, please feel free to reach me out at the end of the presentation or also to look for us online. Digging into the topic. So my goal for today's presentation entitled Walking Hand in Hand with Cybersecurity in a New and Remote World is to give my perspective, okay? I will give my perspective about the implications that remote work had in the organizations, generically speaking. And my main goal, it will be to highlight the importance of cybersecurity in our world. But more than everything, I want to highlight the importance of learning and fostering a culture of knowledge and good practices. And it is inevitable when we speak about walking hand in hand with cybersecurity, we think about the future. We are here talking about cybersecurity in the remote work era, and more than ever, we can see that the way we work, the way we interact with each other has evolved. So I would say that it makes sense to ask the question, what do you think that the future will bring? This is a reflection quite useful, trying to predict what the future holds based on what is happening around us, since it might help us to guide, to direct our steps. And technologically speaking, what do you think that the future will bring? Will it bring more advanced systems, like the concept of IoT, like Internet of Things on wheels, or the future car architecture, where cars will be able to communicate widely, where we envision this broad architecture where the different players are interconnected, like suggested by different concepts like V2V or V2I, that means vehicle to vehicle or vehicle to infrastructure. Well, it is definitely an interesting question, but I'm giving you these examples under the automotive scope. But of course, we could talk about many other fields that are expected to evolve in the near future, and that can culminate also in the potential commercialization of devices, of new platforms or new systems that are more advanced, with not only immediate benefits to their final users, but also to the people that commercialize these systems. But think also, on the other hand, this might open the door to something else. So with this in mind, and bringing back the beginning of my question, what do you think that the future will bring? Will it bring more advanced systems? Or will it bring more threats and dangers? Well, IT and engineering organizations definitely have the goal of developing secure systems, protecting our valuable and sensitive data as much as possible, and protecting these systems from malicious attacks. And the past, and unfortunately also the present, show us the sad consequences that many cyber attacks had on people and organizations, not only in terms of the leakage of sensitive data, but also monetary costs, the reputation of the people involved, their businesses, I mean, their own lives, okay? So therefore, we want our precious data, organizations, institutions want their precious data to be protected from being compromised and attacked. But we want more than just protecting servers or databases or trying to find security gaps. We want more than this. We also want to ensure that the data itself is protected and that some properties are respected in its cyberspace. Therefore, we want organizations to care about cybersecurity, but also about information security. So now you may ask, what is information security? Well, it is basically the science involved in protecting our data, no matter its form. And of course, I mentioned here under information, I specifically say sensitive data, just as an example, because as the name suggests, sensitive data is even more important to be protected. And so information security cares about keeping some data properties that are very, very important, which are confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So when we talk about confidentiality, we talk about this property because not everybody should know what about every sort of information, okay? Integrity, we talk about this property because if the data is transferred or modified, it shall be done as intended and as allowed. And availability, because we want the data, we want our services, we want also the data involved to be always accessible, these by the ones, of course, with permissions, the ones that are allowed to view it or to modify it. And now you may ask, okay, Eunice, so far you are talking about generic definitions and challenges, but what about remote work? Well, I promise I'll get there, but I just wanted you to be aware that within an organization, we want certain tools, certain platforms to be always available to our clients, to our employees. We want to prevent and we want to do our maximum so that our assets, our data is not compromised and attacked. But we also want to ensure that these main properties are respected. So it is quite of a challenge and quite of a job that organizations have nowadays. So now that we are aware of the main challenge, let's just look at the big picture of organizations in general before the remote work kicked in. So Before the new remote era, okay, let's look at the configuration, a generic, of course. Each company might have a different structure, so different ways of working. But let's look at the main scenario that was the scenario of many companies, many enterprises before the remote work became a reality and a new normal. So before the remote work being a reality, let's think, what was the scenario? And let's focus a bit more on technological companies. So they had their employees working at their office. So within an already existent infrastructure, this infrastructure was in principle already configured to support a certain bandwidth or a certain capacity at which a network can transmit data. Also, many companies not dealing yet with the remote work did not need to manage requisitions of material. For instance, in tech companies, for the employees to be able to work, they needed a computer, a display, or other technological gadgets that might be necessary for them to perform their work. So we can say that many companies were not used to deal with these requests, and somehow tracking and monitoring became also and gain importance in this context. And also the majority of the devices was connected into the company's network. So we're inside of this, of this infrastructure. What happens now? Well, the remote work started being a reality, either because the markets started offering more positions for remote workers because of flexibility, or even because of the pandemic, which forced many people to start working from home. So one of the immediate difficulties and risks is that employees bring company devices to their own place, to their home, or even to other places. And these devices will be connected to a Wi-Fi network that might be trustable or not. And more than that, the devices are more exposed to other people, to external agents, including possible people with malicious intents. So here, what I want to say is that if there is more remote work, if the organizations are not prepared, there might be a number of added risks that definitely need to be addressed. For instance, imagine if a computer gets compromised, we do not want the rest of the computers or even the whole platform structure of the company to be compromised. And this could be more likely to happen if a person gets access to a computer while the computer is outside the company. So the remote working came to emphasize some of these issues, and so with these and other questions in mind, let's think what were some key mechanisms and processes that were already widely used before this new normal, but which usage and usefulness became even more clear to us with the remote work. For instance, multi-factor authentication when accessing the company platforms. So what is this concept? So the concept behind multi-factor authentication works by requiring more factors, additional verification information, so additional factors. So instead of just relying on one password, there might be a second, a third, or even more elements being requested so that you have access to certain data, to certain services of the company or of a client. And basically most MFA authentication methodologies are based on one of three types of additional information or more, which are the things that you know, which can be a password, a PIN that we can use, for instance, in a mobile pass application that generates dynamically a password. Also here, the second aspect, things that you have, things that you possess, such as, for instance, a smartphone, or things that you are, things that you inherit, such like fingerprints, like biometric elements. And now you may think, why is this important? Well, if you think usernames and passwords are very vulnerable to brute force attacks. And even if my password is strong enough, is long enough and strong enough with a variety of different characters all mixed, someone else can steal my password from me, or just observe me while I'm typing it in my computer without me being aware of it. But let's now think, okay, so you use your passwords, you try to access your platforms, you use MFA, multi-factor authentications, but then does it mean that MFA is perfect? Well, MFA is not perfect, and it is also targets of attacks and attempts of sabotage. But again, let's see the bigger picture. Using MFA increases the confidence that at least the users that manage to log into an organization platform, for instance, are indeed the authorized users they seem to be. Well, but what are other good practices to keep in this remote work era? For instance, segmentation of work environments. So what does this mean? This means that we decentralize the assets and data. So instead of having everything focused on the same cyberspace, we decentralized, we segregate, okay? And indeed, this segmentation, these strategies are highly effective, and an organization can implement them in such a way that they can limit the impact of a network intrusion. So these are indeed methods that can make much more difficult for an attacker to gain access to an organization's most precious and valuable information. Also, monitoring and threats detection practices are very important, as a company wants to be able, if, for instance, a company device gets compromised, you want to be able to detect it as soon as possible in order for you to act against it, and in order not to compromise other devices, tools, or services of the company. Thus, you have some ideas of how working in a new remote context is something that has many factors associated that need to be considered and reinforced. And again, some of these things that I'm talking here, they already existed before, but the remote work made us see how important they are. But again, if we had threats before, if we had attacks before, we continue to have those now. And some of the top attacks, and this was already in part mentioned in the previous presentation, are malware, that refers to harmful software like viruses, spyware, worms that can, again, retrieve this confidential data and then can disrupt a system. And other kinds of malware already mentioned are ransomware that can make, for instance, the victim's data to become encrypted and to become inaccessible to a device's user under the condition of paying a ransom. And sometimes when we think about ransomware, it goes beyond that, because it also involves the threatening that is done to the victim of exposing data or even deleting it. And what are other kinds of attacks, the top attacks, let's say, that happen on a daily basis? Well, phishing. And now the question, who has never received an email of phishing trying to get personal information from you, or trying to make you click on a non-reliable hyperlink? Well, the reality is that phishing is everywhere through any kind of electronic devices, in social networks, and in any kind of online communications. And it is also a big concern of organizations during this remote working era. Also, other kind of attacks, the man-in-the-middle attack, which is a very common, especially when people are connected to insecure public Wi-Fi networks. And the idea here behind of this attack is that we have an attacker intercepting a communication. And what is really dangerous about this is that here the victim here might think that she's communicating towards a legitimate destination, but she is not. The destination is another one, is being intercepted by this attacker. Other kinds of well-known attacks: denial of service, DOS, which consists on trying to render a system unavailable and unable to operate by basically flooding the servers or the networks with huge quantities of traffic. And some others already partially mentioned as well, the password-based attacks. Here, unfortunately, we have brute force attacks where the attacker tries to exhaustively combine all possible sequences of passwords, of characters, until being logged in successfully into a platform, into a device. But another example that is also quite common of a password-based attack would be the dictionary attacks, when the attacker uses a list of common passwords to try to have access to a user's computer. For some reason, many people say do never use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as a password, as it is in the list of the most common passwords. And we could talk about many, many other attacks, but the list, as you see, would be big, but let's at least just specify these main ones. And now you may ask, okay, so we have seen already the concerns that organizations, people have in general, but now what can I do? How can organizations effectively protect their data, prepare themselves? Well, it's sometimes difficult to get the right answer, but let's say that we need to prepare our future. We'll need to be better prepared to face the challenges that the future has ahead of us. But for this, and to do this, we need to gain first the knowledge that we need. First of all, we need to be aware of what are these challenges. We need to study better the systems. We need to study better the risks, and not only this part of the risks identification, because many organizations are focused on risk identification, but the truth is that many fail on addressing the skills and the culture of their own people. And this is very important because organizations need to increase risk awareness and accountability within the employees, that's for sure. But think about this. It is of no use for you to have and live in a strong castle if you decide to leave the door open. So on the same way, you may have the best systems in the world, but if you do not behave as expected when dealing with those systems, with data, with devices, with platforms, with services, you still might put the organization for which you work at risk and compromise its operations, its business, its clients. So in this sense, I feel that it is very important training and fostering this culture of awareness inside of the organization. And this can be done through internal trainings, and also by motivating more and more people to dig into the cyber world and to become excellent professionals that will help to protect and fortify the organizations. So this is very important. Therefore, promoting the right culture is essential. Summarizing, we started with a reflection about what the future would bring, or what do you think that the future holds for each one of us. Personally, I think that it will bring lots of challenges, for sure, but also loads of opportunities to grow in knowledge. And this personally convinces me more and more that cybersecurity is and will be on the agenda for a long, long time. So with this said, let's keep up with the good work and let's grow in knowledge. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Eunice. I forgot to mention before that Capgemini is also located in Fundão, in our first business center. And currently they are the biggest employer in our city, with almost 500 engineers working in Fundão. Now we are starting the discussion phase of our webinar, and I have two brief questions for our speakers. In the YouTube chat, you can find some interesting interactions, and I also invite you to follow them. So the first question for Pedro, from a user point of view, what would be your biggest advice to avoid being attacked, besides using strong passwords? And for Eunice, what would be the first attitude that a small company should take to protect itself in a digital and connected world if they don't have an IT team? Thank you.
Okay. Maybe I don't know if Eunice wants to start. I will be happy to give the floor to her if she wants.
Well, that's what I call a gentleman. So I would say that this is not about having an IT team. For me, having an IT team within an organization is therefore very useful, very needed. But this is a question of knowledge. What is the capabilities of the organization in terms of human knowledge? What is the knowledge that you have on the people? What is the dimension of the organization? Also, what is the purpose? What is the business of the organization? And there are indeed procedures, policies. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are certifications out there that people can do in order to be certified, but most of all gain knowledge. Again, we have several certifications. We have the ISOs, the ISO, for instance, 27,000, that provides a good overview of information security in terms of managing the systems. So again, this knowledge is necessary to have. First of all, this is not, again, about having an IT team. This is about training the people that are responsible for putting in place the measures and the policies and the processes within the organization to protect the organization. So at the end of the day, it is, again, what I said, it is about acquiring this knowledge, these certifications as well, and apply these policies and good processes that will help us avoiding and making sure that our company is secure.
Thank you, Eunice. Pedro, please.
Well, you know, I could start with some highlight, which would be careful, or be cautious, suspect about the online matter. But you know, along the way, I found out that being too much cautious or being too afraid of doing something or using technology is sometimes worse than the contrary. So I'm not going to say not to be cautious. I'm going to put this in another tone. I would say use the technology, believing that there's good in all these things. Okay, so we need to use technology, because if we start suspecting everything, we will not use anything. Okay, but we need to be careful. I think that's the right word. We need to be careful with how we use it and how much we trust in this system. For example, most of the things I would believe that we already know from our hearts, that we apply in our daily lives. But when we go online, we just relax even the smallest things that we already knew from when we were kids. Let's put it like this. For example, imagine that we go somewhere and we look at someone, and when we look at someone, we recognize that person. We start talking with that person because we recognize, we do authentication, okay? And this is biometric authentication, it's live authentication. We see several things when we look at someone. We see that the person is alive. We see that a person, not a photograph of the person, and we talk with that person. We recognize that person, and we say that person is Ricardo, that person is Eunice, and we talk with that person. So we do this. And when we do this in real life, we use a set of rules that enable us to interact with people and interact with each other. When we go online, for example, sometimes we are talking in a chat and we immediately assume that because it says Eunice or because it says Ricardo or it has a photo there, it's that person. You just need to be a little more cautious because it might not be. And something in our minds should tell us that, be careful, verify. Is it that person that we are talking with? And most of the things we already know. So that would be I would say that would be my greatest advice, is to use technology, not being afraid of it, being a little bit cautious and suspect of some things, and use what we already know for the real world, not relaxing the things that we would do carefully in the real world and relaxing exactly those things in the digital realm just because we are seated down in a chair using a computer. I don't know if this was a very clear advice, but hope it helps.
Okay, thank you so much. In our chat, we have, I think, a final question for both Eunice and Pedro. And the question is, what is your opinion about the future of cybersecurity? And what would be the main challenges for the cybersecurity professional?
Okay, so I think I'll start again. I think that as systems will evolve, for instance, in the beginning, I was mentioning the evolution that is expected to occur on the automotive, and is already actually taking place in the automotive field. And I feel this opens the door to new vulnerabilities because we'll be more open to communicate with the outside world with different agents. And these just on the automotive fields, but these will be verified on different other fields. So for instance, if we talk about medical devices, we have devices now that are able to measure our levels of, for instance, glucose on the blood, and these without being invasive. So we have non-invasive systems right now that do that kind of measurements. And when we think about that, you think that the next step in the future, maybe it will be the administration of insulin in an automatic way. So the systems are evolving. We are indeed becoming smarter and smarter. But with these, new risks also emerge from the development of these systems. So for me, cybersecurity will, again, as I mentioned, will be on the agenda for a long, long time. It will continue being more and more important, and even if we go even online and try to look for the expectations of experts on the field, saying what are the, let's say, the top topics that the hot topics, sorry, that will remain in the next upcoming year. Cybersecurity is there because, again, we are developing, our systems are becoming, are having more and more functionalities. So that will also open the way for attackers to explore new and new kinds of attacks. Sometimes using old techniques, sometimes finding new ways of compromising those systems. So yes, answering your question, for me, cybersecurity will continue, will be a hot topic for a long, long time. And I think that the second part of your question was, this is, sorry, fish memory.
It's what the main challenges to the cybersecurity professional.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I was without sound.
Okay, thank you. So I think one of the main challenges will be to the adaptation speed. So we'll find new vulnerabilities soon. I'm sure of that, in the new systems that are about to come. And I think one of the main difficulties for people taking care of these, people working on this field will be, okay, how can I adapt myself to the new realities that are coming? Do the processes and policies that are on place need to be updated? How do I apply that into my company? I think that will be one of the biggest challenge of all.
Okay, thank you very much, Eunice. Pedro?
You know, what would be a major plot twist at this moment is that if you go to the chat of YouTube now, because Eunice was asking what was the second part, and I told her what was the second part of the question. It made me look like I made the second part of the question, though I was reading it. The major plot twist would be if I was the Gotcha Supreme, also making questions to myself in the chat. I'm not, but I'm just saying that this is the world we live in, okay? Because some of us have photos there and names there, and some of us don't, and we just talk with each other, you see? That's why I was saying that before. So in terms of what's my opinion in terms of future cybersecurity, normally I structure my opinions by assumptions, okay? So I take some assumptions. There's one assumption that I'm not going to talk about here today because it's really bad. There's one assumption that's really bad, so I'm taking that one out just to say this. But the other two is that let's look at the cybersecurity from this point on to the near future and then to the far future. And these are the two assumptions. In the near future, I completely agree. Actually, I completely agree with everything that Eunice said just before. Cybersecurity is here. It will stay here for a long time. So if there are people that are thinking on going into cybersecurity, it's a good time to go. Cybersecurity will be their career paths for sure, because there's enough. The time frame in which cybersecurity is going to be very important. It will last for a long time. So people will make a career out of this. That's for sure. So cybersecurity will continue as a hot topic for long because things are still getting worse before they get better, for sure, because we have more devices getting connected, more people dependent on these devices. And some of these devices are still worse than the ones we had at some point in the past, not from the beginning of times, but from the recent past. For example, I'm talking about some devices that are really small from the Internet of Things that are really relaxed in terms of cybersecurity. So if we get more devices like this, we'll get a worse state of cybersecurity. We'll need more cybersecurity experts working on this during that time. So this will happen for a while. But if humans are what we believe we are, which are beings that think about stuff and want to do stuff correctly, we'll have to manage or to solve this problem from its root cause, which means that we will fail. This is my strong belief that we will fail if we are not able to embed security from design, or if we don't get to the point where security is a known fact. Just that, okay? So the software, the systems will be secure. They will not have vulnerabilities from inception. I hope that we get to that point, but we are talking about much in the future. So what is your opinion in the future of cybersecurity? Is these two in the short to medium term, it's there as a reactive and as a preventive job. But in the long future, I would say in the long term, I would say that cybersecurity should be embedded by design. Will we need cybersecurity professionals at that point? Yes, they will be different from nowadays. They will be designing the security solution and not only reacting to security problems. I think that will be the difference. I don't know if this was clear in terms of presentation.
Perfect, Pedro. Thank you very much, Eunice and Pedro. It was an honor to have you here. And now it's time to close this webinar. I think that we have achieved our main objective, to alert using knowledge and experts to the challenges of cybersecurity in times of new work models, namely remote work. Thank you very much for following us. The webinar will be available on the Osiris YouTube channel in case that you didn't have the chance to follow us from the beginning. Next webinar, The New Normal, Reinventing Regional Development, will be on Friday, September 9 at 10 a.m. Central European Time. This webinar is brought to you by the lead partner of the Osiris project, Region Västerbotten in Sweden, and partners Abo Academy University, Experience Lab, and Regional Council of Österbottnia in Finland. Results from an evaluation of the open social innovation activities in the shadow of COVID-19 carried out by the Experience Lab at Abo Academy will be presented. Thank you all.
you.